Today's episode is brought to you by the IFS Institute. We're excited to invite you to the 2024 IFS Virtual Conference happening October 24th and 25th. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just curious about internal family systems, this event is for you. Join us online for 2 days of transformational learning, dynamic workshops, and insightful talks from leading voices in the fields of therapy, coaching, and beyond. It's the perfect opportunity to deepen your understanding, connect with a global community, and explore how IFS can enrich you both personally and professionally. Grab your tickets at the links in my bio to let them know that you heard about this on The One Inside. Welcome to Season 6 of The One Inside, an Internal Family Systems podcast. I'm Tammy Sollenberger, author of The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about their inner world and who have a desire to connect to that authentic self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am super excited today to talk to Audrey Davidheiser, a California licensed psychologist, certified IFS therapist, and consultant. After founding and directing a counseling center for the Los Angeles Dream Center, she now devotes her practice to survivors of trauma, including spiritual abuse. And Audrey is speaking at the annual conference on grief, but we have a huge list of things that we can talk about. But welcome, Audrey. I'm super excited that you're on the podcast today. And tell me where you are in the world and what you see when you look out your nearest window.
Yes. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. My window is fairly close, but if I were to look outside, I would see a row of neighbors, houses, and we just moved in here. So I'm really loving my new neighborhood. This is my home office. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so are you in Los Angeles or sort of around Los Angeles?
Around LA. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And what's the weather there today?
It's hot. It's going to be hot, unseasonably warm. But because I'm from Indonesia, I'd rather be super hot than super cold. So I'm like, okay with the weather.
Okay. And so why don't we start there? You're from Indonesia. So let's talk about your ethnic and cultural heritage. I want to hear about that. And also your faith background.
Yeah. I actually, thank you for naming that, because part of why I'm a little nervous about this is because English is not my native tongue. But yeah, I'm from Indonesia. My plan was actually to come here to get my bachelor's degree, and that's it, go back home. But a pretty big riot happened during my sophomore year in college, pretty big. It targeted my ethnicity and my faith background. And so it just did not make sense then, right? Why would I go back to a place that back then were trying to kind of decimate people like me? And so because of that, I just stayed here, did my studies and all that, and now I have a beautiful life, and I love both places. I can't lie about that. But America is my adopted country, and I love both a lot. But I think being from Asian culture really helps in working with clients that have a lot of like legacy burdens. First of all, they're pretty tenacious. Even if they know that this burden is not serving the person well, they have the set of loyalty that I really respect. And so with parents that have legacy burden, I found that the more respect I afford them, the more they're willing to like listen to my pitch. And even with that, right, it doesn't mean that they're going to go, oh, here you go, I'm just going to unburden. But yeah, I just have a lot of affinity, respect for these parents, because they're holding on to this burden because they feel it's from the ancestors. We're going to do something right about it. This is a legacy. What are you talking about wanting to trash it? Nuh-uh. So I get that.
I love that. Okay, so it makes sense that I love the word tenacious. So these parts are tenacious because they're like work in their minds, they're working for the ancestors. Sort of they have the burden or the weight of the ancestors. Yep. And so that is, of course, they have to be tenacious. Yeah.
And there's a sense of disloyalty, like who will I be? Maybe for a lot of folks here in America or the West, this sense of family ties doesn't really ring true perhaps. But again, remember, I'm from Indonesia. So for us over there, it's very collectivistic. It's not just, well, you have to protect your reputation. It's more like your family. Who are you as a family member, right? So again, that's why I understand these parts, because at least some of them that I've interviewed, they're like, well, if I let go of this, then where is my tie to, my mom or my dad or even further back? So yeah, I just love working with parts like that because I think I have that background. I understand the importance of, ancestries that go back generations that maybe even I haven't met before. So
I love that. And also, right, like we in America are so individualistic. And so like I'm thinking of, okay, well, me. And so it's not working for me. And there's so much meanness. Yeah. And so, yeah, to have that understanding of the collective family community, that's what these parts are really fighting for or in holding on to.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And I do understand not every system has them, which is completely fine. I'm just saying if you find in your own system a part that seems to be like, no, I'm not letting go of this burden, especially if you find out, oh, this is a legacy burden, the more respect you have, like, I mean, not fabricated. We know IFS, right? It has to flow naturally from you. But and I just share another tip.
Yeah, I like tips. We like tips, don't we?
I did this training with, I think someone from the Great Britain, but I made a mistake. This person had a critic that I was engaging in, and it was just not going anywhere. And then when I think I learned something like, oh, this critic was actually older than the person. Then the light bulb went off for me. And I was like, oh, and I thought about, oh, if I have my grandfather in the room, I will definitely respect my grandpa. I will offer the best seat in the house. And so I did that with this part. And I said, would you like to take a seat? I have this special tea that I only take out for people that I respect and cherish. May I please brew a cup for you? Everything changed, I'm telling you. It was like the part was like, oh yeah, of course. And then the relationship between that part and the self, the client, because he's training, self was like solidified. I'm like, whoa, look at that. Just a little bit of respect that I brought from my own background, right? Because your background may be completely different. You don't have to serve tea, but whatever, in you that you feel like, oh, this is how I show respect. I think it'll translate to this part, like, oh, I'm being taken seriously, especially because, critics they tend to be like isolated, right? The system doesn't like them. But if you can show up in your genuine self and you just offer respect, I think that could be a game changer.
That's beautiful. I love that. So it could be whatever T is, right? Like whatever T is. And I love that idea because we think about these parts too, right? If I was, so we do it the other way, right? Like if I was talking to a child, how would I talk to a child? And I can think about talking to my parts that way. That makes sense, right? If my grandfather walked in the room, I wouldn't be like, shut up, you're driving me crazy. Like how we tend to talk to how parts of us tend to talk to our critics. That's no way will we talk to our maybe we wouldn't talk to our grandfather that way. I love that. Like, come sit, have some tea. Let me honor you. Let me sit and listen to what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah. But then I'm also mindful that for some people, that grandfather may be a person of abuse, right? So if that analogy doesn't work for you, forget about it. Just think of someone, if they walk into your room, immediately you're like, how can I show respect? Right? So don't worry about grandpa or whoever. For you, what works? Yeah. Whoever that person is that signifies a sense of maybe a little bit of awe or, wow, I'm so thankful for you, or I so appreciate what you've done. That's the person that you want to treat your critics or people parts that hold legacy burdens with.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What if we shift and talk about grief then? And I would love to, like we would love to hear about your dad, if you want to share about what happened with your dad and why grief is so close to your heart that you've written a book about grief.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I suppose I've always known a life where my parents were together. They were married before I was born. They were together. They love each other. If there was some friction, it would be minor. So I'm not one of those people that had like their parents' marriage was rocky. It was always like secure. And so for some time, I just assumed they both would grow old together, and they would retire together. And so when this happened, I think he had a heart issue that we did not really know about, because he was athletic all my life, like athletic. Like he won championships, kind of athletic. Even he was like, he loves sports. So he would be the last person in my world that I would have assumed would die prematurely. So yeah, when that happened, it happened so suddenly. In 1 second, our entire world, like my family, not just me, changed. And I closed my practice because I didn't know how long I was going to be away. My mom, by this time, I mean, nobody knew that this was coming. So she was shocked. And I was like, I love my parents and one of them is gone now. I'm going to be there for my mom, however way she needs me, right? So I told my clients, I don't know when I'll be back, but I have to go. And so understandably, they left. They needed care, right? I'm not holding anything against them. But by the time I came back, I had no plan. Around the same time that my dad suddenly died, I was getting to know IFS. I got into level 1, got into my own therapy, and learned just, oh my goodness, how transformative this model really is. Like for anything, we know this. IFS can be, used for anything, but I was grieving. And so this model helped me with my grief so much so that I'm like, wait a minute. If I know how this is helpful to me, why do I want to share this with other people who are grieving? And it doesn't have to be grieving somebody's death. It could be a job loss. It could be you moved a lot, so you don't have the same childhood that everybody else had. It could be anything, anything could result in a loss. But anyway, so that's why I was like, wow, I mean, I'm still missing my dad, certainly, but neither am I crying, every single time the memory of him comes back. Because in the first year I was all right. Like, I'm sure a lot of people have that same, experience. But yeah, I'm not like that devastated anymore. And I think it's in large part because of IFS. I did it and it helped me. And I think if I'm doing my job right, people that read the book will also be able to at least get glimpses of, oh, okay, there's hope here. Because grief is one of the most difficult things, or loss, I should say, not just grief. One of the most difficult things in life, I think.
Mm. So what do you think that is different? Let me ask it this way, maybe. What is it about your book that brings us something new or different or tips about grief?
Yes. Well, in IFS, we believe that all parts are welcome. And so when we apply that to grief, that means all parts that are grieving are welcome, even if they don't look like your typical grief might look. So if there's an angry part in this person's system, without IFS, the tendency would be like, no, you can't be angry at the person who died. You can only talk about positive things. But the honest truth is everybody is flawed somewhere, right? So if you're not supposed to acknowledge that, well, yes, the person who died was a saint, but also a sinner, then you're not really grieving fully because your angry part is being exiled. And there's a difference between, okay, I'm hearing that. I'm not talking about my dad now. I'm talking about like somebody else. I'm hearing that this person who loved you devastated you, but they also, stole from you or something. And then, of course, there's a part of you that's really angry, and that is okay. There's a difference between doing that versus saying, no, you can't say that because the person died. No, you have to preserve the person's memory. So I think that's one of the major differences.
And we do that, right? Someone will pass away and it's like, oh, they were just the best person in the whole world. And we're only allowed to say that they're the best person in the whole world. Like, and no one's saying, actually, they were not that awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I really want to allow any mourner, any griever to think about, it's not just that everybody grieves differently, but every part of you grieves differently as well.
Wow. And just you saying that, I'm like, it feels like it gives permission for all my parts to have a different experience of grief.
That's right.
How do you translate that to loss too? Like whether it's loss of job, loss of relationship, loss of an experience, like sort of a typical experience other people don't have. Like, how does it translate to loss?
Here's an example. Let's say someone's dating and they've been dating for a long time, and it's sort of just assumed by them, by the couple, and by the people around, oh, they're gonna live together, they're gonna end up together. But then something happens, so the couple splits up, right? If the person who's left feels lost about that, and then here's a voice inside that says, you were never even engaged. You were never even married. Why are you crying over this person? Get over it. okay, well, maybe there's a critic inside of you that for whatever reason feels like this loss is disenfranchised. You feel like you can't allow your loss to be publicized. If you have a tie, emotional tie with that thing, and that thing is taken away against your will, of course you will feel something. But the question is if there's other parts in you, or maybe other parts in other people that say things like, you shouldn't feel sorry about that.
It feels okay to talk about this in just for a second. I had some miscarriages before I had my son. And I remember going to a therapist and saying, like, I don't feel like I should be this devastated. And she kind of said the same thing, but you're, it wasn't just you were pregnant for just this small amount of time. It was the hopes and dreams and thinking that you were going to have this person and this baby and this life, and you were going to finally be a mom. And so, there's just so much in my system, there's so much devastation. And I felt like people were like nice to me about it, but also like not understanding, it's like 1 in 3 pregnancies result in miscarriage, and, everybody has them, and, just that kind of thing. So, but it was like, well, it was my first one. So I ended up having others, but so I think when I think about loss, as you're saying, I'm like, yeah, I remember that. I remember that really, really strongly.
And I love those statistics, right? That people cite kind of supposedly to help you, like, oh, don't worry about it, sweetheart. It does not help. It does not help. But at the same time, I want to say that the people who say that are probably motivated by their thinking part, right? That they're like logical, like this is the data, just rest on the data. And thinking parts grieve too. So I just that's why the headline is just every part grieves differently. For thinking parts, grieving is done by thinking. Hey, surprising enough, right? So that's why they're like, here are some data, here's stats, and this is what we can do to commemorate this or to make sure this doesn't happen to other possible mourners out there. But yeah, I just want to invite thinking parts out there, though, to remember that not every part grieves like you. Other parts may need to cry. They may need to isolate for a while. But this is, again, why IFS is so important, because you were just mentioning how people don't always get our grief. So in fact, this is true of the Western society in general, this tendency of focusing on the happy. Let's just focus on happy, happy, happy. And then if it's not good and pleasant and shiny, let's just lock it up. The whole world may say, I don't want to hear about your grief anymore. It's past 1 year. Why are you still crying? But yourself is there. Yourself can go, I want to hear about your grief. Yeah, you can grieve whatever you want to. I'm here for you. That's such a beautiful gift. I can go inside and find myself. You sit with this part of me that's really grieving.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We forget that so often, that like I can be there for my parts. I can turn towards them and hear and witness and understand and hear. I was working with somebody as a client. They were a client, and we were trying to sort of, kind of map out some parts and get to know some parts. And she kept saying, there's just so much grief here. There's so much grief here. And it was almost like the grief wasn't letting her identify parts. And I just wondered if grief makes things more cloudy or makes more dense. It was almost like grief is here, so I can't identify any parts.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I probably would just say, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of grief here. I said, okay, you and I, can we sit with that grief? So I'm using myself certainly, but I'm also inviting my client self to be with the grief itself, as well as the part that is saying there is too much grief for you to do anything else, right? That's the message.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So can we just sit with that?
Yeah.
And then if the person's like, no, that's too overwhelming, I'm here. I'm sitting with you. But basically, because I know the idea is, no, if you open that door, a dam is going to break. I get that fear. And maybe it depends also, is this a fresh grief, or is this something that happened years and years ago? There could be a difference, right? So it could also be that, well, if there's so much grief, I want to honor that. I want to ask your system, maybe this is too fresh. Maybe we'll just circle back. Maybe we'll talk about other things that are more like your day-to-day life. Are you functioning? Can you go to work still? And then maybe after some time has gone by, then we'll see. I'll knock on that door. How about now? Is the grief still immense?
Do you find that you have to do a little bit more like direct access when people are like sort of in that grieving and they're with you and they're just flooded with the grief and heartbroken and devastated? How do you get like self-depart when that's happening?
If the grief is fresh, I would definitely do more direct access. With enough direct access, there's a little bit of self energy that is introduced. And if I start sensing, then that's when, would you like to be with someone that can be doing this 24/7 for you, even when you right? And that's like a gentle way of reminding the person again, you have a self, you can do this, especially with somebody else holding space for you. But you're right. Yeah. Initially, if the grief is fresh, direct access is probably best.
Like, I don't want to say like, oh, it's just a part. Like when I say like, okay, so a part of you is heartbroken, and it feels a little bit like it's invalidating, right? Like and I know that we don't mean it that way. So is there a way, like, have you found a way to not name it as a part that then feels invalidating? Like it's just a part of you that's heartbroken, or part of you that's grieving?
I would use my client's language and would hear what they choose to explain their grief as. But I might say there's a lot of heartache here, or understandably, there's a lot of unmet expectations that are then causing some sadness. And then if this is like if we're just beginning to work together, I probably will ask, are there parts that identify with that? So you can sit with all of them and just say, you get it.
That's so beautiful. I love the way you just did that. That's beautiful. It's like, it feels it's an unblending statement, right? It's an unblending, and it's just very validating and holding.
It's the experience of losing someone so dear that that's the other thing with loss, you feel so helpless. Like, wait, I don't want this. Like if there's a button to undo it, I would press that button until I jam it, right? But no, sorry, there's no button. This just happened without your permission. And so it's that helplessness, it's that shock, it's that resignation of, oh, I don't have a say in this. When you can pause and say, but I have a self, I can be that one saying to my parts, I get it, because I went through the devastation myself. So I'll be here for you. And no, you will never make me feel like, what are you doing? You're still grieving. It's been years. No, because I'm that person too. Again, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that can help a lot of different grievers and mourners continue with their life, because that's the one thing with grief, is that if we don't fully grieve, it can arrest our growth as a person. It can stop us from hoping again, from accepting opportunities. It's just detrimental. So that's the other side of why I wrote this book, because I want people to get their full destiny. I don't want people to just kind of stop midway because of something humongous that they lost. That would be tragic.
Yeah. So it's funny as you're saying that, I can feel my parts being like just sort of a push away feeling. And I'm like, yeah, because that's kind of what they do when things get really hard. So whether it's grief or whatever it is, it's like, that they do that, right? Those parts do that. So it's so familiar to me. So I'm like, yeah, with grief, that's what they're going to do too. Can we talk about this idea of your affinity for angry parts?
Angry parts are there because they are protecting something valuable. They would not be there if there's no valuables in your system. Then just go. Like if your house doesn't have anything valuable, you don't have to lock it, right? You can just have windows open, the doors open. So I feel like angry part has been so misunderstood. And, like when you're doing IFS, the goal in air quotes is to get to the exile, right? So angry parts also feel like, what am I, a placeholder? You're just going to talk to me so that you can remove me and then you can talk to somebody else that's more important. It's like, hello, so I just feel for that. And so if our client has an angry part, I'm like, let's just sit and chat and show me your anger. Tell me where you're angry, because I can handle it. Indirect access would be so great in that. Because I've done this with so many angry parts, and they just mellow out. And not like immediately, obviously, but I really do spend time until they understand the logic of why we do need to go and find the young parts that they're protecting. But I love the angry parts.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, it sounds like you are honoring them just like you honor the grandfather, right? You're honoring the parts that other parts don't want to honor, right? They're worried they're going to flood. They're worried that they take over, and that you're like, nope, let's have them come to the table. Like, let's have the anger come to the table, hand it a microphone, and let it say what it wants to say. I love
they
that.
promise them I'm going to demolish the microphone. Yes.
Yeah. You cannot pick up the microphone and throw it across the room.
Oh.
But yes. I love this when we think about like religious trauma, which I know is another one of your specialties, because I think about how the church in general handles grief and anger, right? Like it's either invalidating or diminishing or sort of just throwing platitudes at grief, or like you're not allowed to be angry at all. Like, so I love that you're really speaking for and like putting a spotlight on those parts of us, of all of us.
Yeah, but that's why I really do want to say hi to churches out there, I suppose, to say, yes, I'm a psychologist, but I'm not your enemy. I'm actually bilingual. I speak mental health and spirituality. So if you allow me, I would love to kind of introduce the two worlds to each other. Because this whole business of church trauma or church hurt or religious abuse, that is real. Can we do better? Especially because I am a religious person. I come from a religious background. I just really want to kind of reach out to my fellow Christians and church, basically saying, hey, if we all can make that U-turn, and like what you said, Tammy, realize we all have angry parts. We all have parts that we have exiled. Because I think until people in church leadership really do that, unfortunately, they may act out. They may still kind of perpetrate against other people. And then this will just continue to be a cycle that is unbroken. So my hope is, another hope of just writing this book, is that those in church leadership, those that are going to church, would be more open to just kind of realizing, hey, everybody's got parts. That's not a curse word. It's just reality. We are only human beings. We have parts, and if we don't attend to them, they will act out.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So how does your faith background tie into this?
Yeah. So from my mom's side of the family, I'm a fourth generation Christian. So all my life, I knew that I'm the fourth generation because my great-grandfather first became a Christian and then just kind of taught the generations after him, including my mom, about Christianity. But I was raised in a house of, let's go to church, let's read the Bible and all that. And I just did that because I always had obedient parts. But then I moved here. And like I said, maybe I didn't say it, but the culture shock was amazingly terrible. That coupled with young adulthood is hard. Going to college for the first time, not just even like living in a dorm. This is like 9,000 miles away, right? So it was super duper hard. And I remember thinking at some point, wow, I guess I'll have to find out if the God they told me about is real. And thankfully, God is real for me. And from then to now, I could tell you story after story about how I should not have survived, and I haven't even told you about Vermont. What would a tropical girl like me be doing in Vermont for 1 year when the winter was like 8 months long, Tammy? I was like, oh my God, it's still winter? I thought this is April. No, I'm sorry. The snow is still on the ground.
I live in New Hampshire, so I know exactly what you mean. But right now is the place to be because the colors are amazing. The oranges. I just going to get a shout out to fall. New England. Yeah. But yes, in April when it's still winter, it's not fun. It's really not fun. Yeah. But for you though, so this was, culture shock after shock after shock. You were in Vermont. Oh my goodness. And freezing. Yeah. And so can you say a little bit about how God, you don't have to, if this doesn't feel comfortable, but I'm curious, like, how did you feel like God did show up for you where you're like, okay, he is real?
Yeah. Yeah. So the Vermont thing, I went there for my internship, by the way, because I was so naive. I was like, because I didn't read like in detail, but I just read that this site in Vermont was X miles from Boston. I'm like, I can do Boston. Boston's my friend, right? I just didn't know that it's just 180 miles from Boston. So for all practical purposes, Vermont was its own country.
Yeah. Vermont and Boston are not, no.
Exactly, not exactly neighbors. Yeah. I love Vermonters. Hey, shout out to all Vermonters if they're hearing me. But yeah, for me, it was, totally culture shock. But yeah, I love reading. I'm going somewhere. I remember your question, but I'm just saying, So on the flight from LA to, we had a layover somewhere. And then from that place to Vermont, I was reading because I was like sad. I was upset that I had to leave home for a year, right, for my internship. But whatever I read would not stick. And I was like, this is kind of weird. But okay, let me change, because I brought a lot of fiction. Didn't have Kindle back then. Tried the second fiction. Didn't work either. So I landed in Vermont, did my stuff, put my stuff away. But then whenever I felt like I wanted, an escape, I tried reading again, nothing stuck. It was like I didn't have the attention for some reason. So I started to get worried, like, what is wrong with me? And I prayed about that. And then I realized, like, I think I didn't know that this year was going to be more than just my internship. It was like, the way I saw it anyway, it was like the year that the Lord wanted me for himself. And so he just really taught me that even when the church that I grew up is in a sense of from 18 years old to that time here in America, even when that church wasn't around, my favorite pastors weren't around. It wasn't also, remember, it wasn't a time of podcasting where I could just easily jump online. There was no such thing. So all of these like comfort food for my soul basically was not available. Everything that was comforting to me, including reading, was kind of like taken away. Wow. To where that year, the Lord proved to me, if I can have a Bible, truly, I'm not trying to sound pious, and I can pray, he answers me. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was that year that he told me, Audrey, you are actually more blessed than you know. Mm. And I held on to that because I felt like that's true. Like, even though, like everybody else, my life is full of hardship, but for some reason, I still exist.
So yeah, I really hear that you were like stripped down. So that was, it's only your, if I can say this, like you're only your divine self, like capital S self, and the divine Father. That was all you had, right? It was just sort of like you and him, and like your spirituality was it.
Yeah, that's true. And that because everybody else was taken from me, all the comfort was taken from me. Well, what remains then? Yeah. It's just me. And then that's basically when I first realized, wait, this thing is real, and he's faithful to me. And have I been let down by God? Well, when my father died, I didn't see that coming. So I can't say I was angry at God, because I wasn't, but I was more like, whoa, you could have told me, like if we were friends, you could have like given me a heads up. And I was, for the longest time, I was really upset about that. I mean, not upset at God, but just upset at, why didn't I see this coming? So I spoke about that in my book as well. But the point being is, I don't want to paint this picture of, oh, my life has been rosy with God. Like everybody else, I've got my ups and downs. I've yelled and screamed and cried and like, why, it's unfair. And then I've also said, whoa, I didn't see that, Lord. Thank you. I was so blinded, and I was like railing against you. And then look at what you've done. Really, I could talk some more about like how I even met my husband. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just saying there's so many stories that I look back and realize I just didn't realize that. And here I was angry at God. So
beautiful. Do you have a name of your book yet? Your new, because this is your second book.
Yeah, well, the first one is self-published. So it almost doesn't count.
Aw, it does count. So what's the name of your second one? Your second book?
It's going to be called Wholehearted Grieving.
That's beautiful. And what's the name of your first book? Let's give that some love.
Thank you so much. Part of me really feels embarrassed for the first book because it is self-published, but it's Surviving Difficult People When Your Faith and Your Feelings Clash.
That's great. And then how can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Okay, so my website is aimforbreakthrough.com. I'm not the best at Instagram, but my Instagram is Dr. Audrey D. So if you want to show up there, I have parts that are so embarrassed over my Instagram, so maybe don't show up there.
And parts are like, I'm immediately going to your Instagram page now. Yeah, it's great. So Audrey, can I ask you my last question? If you had to do something different in your life, what would you do?
I would complain a lot less.
Oh, I'm curious about your complaining parts and how they're trying to help you. But Audrey, this is great. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited for your workshop at the conference. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you left a rating, a review, a like, comment, share with your family, your friends. That would mean so much to me. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or on Amazon. You can visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, or you can download a free Get to Know a Should part of you. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and at The One Inside on Facebook and on YouTube. Jeff Schrum co-produces The One Inside, and I am forever grateful for Jeff. Also thankful for Jack Reardon for creating the music, and just thank you for listening. 6 seasons, over 1 million downloads. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you in this community. I'll see you next time.